All right, so now I'm going to explain a little bit more about these modified, and we call them modified Gracies because what they've done is they've taken the traditional 1112, which is only for measles. And if you look on any one of your catalogs or in some of the other booklets and pamphlets that I've given you from Hugh Freedy, and it shows the 1112 that's designated only for use on a mesial surface. Okay, and then a 1314 is always designated only for a distal surface. So somebody in Hugh Freedy got the bright idea that they were going to just combine them, because when you're working on a sextant, instead of having two instruments there on your bracket table, you would only be using one to work on mesials and distals, all right? Because it just would simplify your life a little bit easier. But that being said, we have what we call a modified Gracie, which is one end mesial, one end distal. And what you need to determine at the very beginning is if you're at a certain sextant. Let's say we're going to go back to, again, this lower right on the buckle, only because it's easier for you guys to see it. Then I'm going to pick up one of these two. I don't know which one. I'm going to mix them all up. Here, they're all mixed up. Okay? So I'm going to pick one up. It's supposed to be a joke. And I'm going to start with the distal of number 31. All right. Is this my mesial end or is this my distal end? So, again, knowing what we've known and what I've been trying to, get you guys to remember is that the more sharp the bends, that's going to be your distal end. Okay, so there's a bend there, and I see that end, and then there's this. So compare this to this. This is my distal end. All right, so now I want to make sure that I have the right one for this particular sextant. So my next step is to identify my cutting edge. And my cutting edge is identified by me holding the instrument with the terminal shank at 12 o'clock up and down, and then I identify the blade, the side of the blade that tips down, okay, that tilts. Okay, and that's what makes this area specific. All right, so this one tilts on this side, but my distal surface is on this side, so that's not going to be the one that I want. Okay, so I'm going to pick up the next one by process of elimination. That's my mesial end. This is my distal end. I find my cutting edge. There's, and sometimes you got to look at both of them to make an accurate. Okay, so here's my cutting edge on this side. Okay. Okay, and if I try this one, okay, I'll find that my cutting edge is not able to be, because I'm staring at it right in the face. Okay, so don't feel like you're not doing the right thing by not picking up the right instrument at first, because as a clinician, that's how you identify the correct instrument, or the more appropriate instrument, is by looking at it and making sure that that's adaptable or not. I had a patient one time ask me, he said, why do you keep putting an instrument down and picking up another one? Don't you know what you're doing? I said, no, sir, it's not that I don't know what I'm doing. I got to make up I'm picking up the right one. Okay? Because that's, when a surgeon picks up a scalpel, don't you think he picks it up and looks at the end and makes sure he's got the right end? I don't know. Call me crazy, but that's kind of how we learn to make sure we're doing the right thing. So again, here's my correct end. So my get ready zone is right here on the distal buccal line angle. I'm going to drop the handle. I'm going to hug the tooth so it goes in a little bit. And again, this is a little curvier, so it's not as easy to keep really flush. Okay, but like this, so the back end goes in. And then I back round it into the curate, goes into the sulcus, and then I'm going to stand it up, okay, so that my terminal shank is parallel. So when this working end is in a sulcus, okay, the only visible clue that I have that I'm correctly adapted is that this terminal shank is standing straight up. If this terminal shank is going over like this, I am not correctly adapted. If this terminal shank is coming out like this, I'm not correctly adapted. So that terminal shank standing up is the only visual clue that I am in correct adaptation for what I need to do. Okay? Then I pull out, okay, and come like this, and then I'm going to start with at the same get ready zone, but I'm going to flip my end so that I have my mesial surface, because the mesial work again is what does your straight buckles and linguals. I'm going to go in back at the get ready zone, leading with the toe and with hugging the tooth, and then I'm going to utilize some horizontal strokes to get me around this this straight buckle surface right here, and I'm going to pivot and stand up on my pivot on my forefinger, and then make my way into the mesial. And as you can see, that terminal shank is standing straight up, which is my visual clue that this working end is at 70 to 80 degrees correct adaptation for calculus removal. Now I'm going to go on to the number 29, and I'm going to flip it again and go in at this line angle. So now we're working with a much smaller tooth, much less area to go around. I'll stand it up. Here I go into the straight distal, okay? And, you know, as you go into the straight distal, just remember, sometimes when you get stuck, you know, I see sometimes you'll get stuck like this. And what happens when you're stuck and your instrument flies off the hand, off the tooth, it's because you're not, maybe you're adapting more than that 1/3 tip, and then you can't get out of there. So, again, making sure that you're pivoting correctly so that you're adapted, and then you just pull out very undramatically without flying off like this. Flip the end, go back here on this distal, the get ready zone again. Alright, now I'm going to do my small horizontal strokes, and I'm going to pivot and make my way around to the mesial. Okay, these are really beautiful instruments to use. They have, they're I guess the essence of dental hygiene when you stop and think, because everybody really needs to learn how to use Gracie curettes. Gracie curettes are just really the foundation of periodontal instrumentation. If I were going to go up here to the upper right on the buckle, again, let me try to determine which instrument I'm going to need. Here's my curvier end, here's my straighter end, this is the distal, this is the mesial. Let me find my cutting edge. My cutting edge is right here, so this is my correct end, okay? So if I were working with this instrument right here, I'd probably be using, I'd probably be up here around 11 o'clock, and I'd be using an extra oral fulcrum, something like this, okay? And I'm going to go in like this with the leading with the toe, stand up on my fulcrum, okay? And as you can see, the terminal shank is standing straight up and down. Okay, straight up and down. Flip it around, go back to your get ready zone. Now I've got horizontal strokes. And watch how my hand pivots to get that adapted correctly so that that terminal shank is standing straight up and down on the mesial surface of that tooth. And yes, I am fulcrumed on the same tooth, which I'm not supposed to be doing, but like I said right before that, was that I probably would be using an extra oral fulcrum. Sometimes if an extra oral fulcrum is not what you're going to use, you may find yourself even fulcruming a little bit ahead to get that done so that you would be safe and not be in the line of fire. But at this point, I think I would have to resort to an extra oral fulcrum to make sure that I got that in there safely and kept that angulation correct.